On both sides, we're going to learn as an experiment. We'll see how it goes. The 10th parak of Yevamos that starts on Daf Pei Zayin Amud Beis. And I chose this parak because it touches on some of the, first of all, very interesting sugyas about testimony and about evidence, what evidence is reliable, is acceptable in a Jewish court. And it also touches on a very relevant topic, a very tragic kind of situation called the Igun, which means that we have reason to believe that this woman, this married woman's husband, unfortunately perished. But the question is, we don't have the corpse, we don't have the body, and whether or not we have enough evidence to assume and conclude that the husband in fact died. In modern history, that was very relevant in 10 cases in the September 11th terrorist tragedy. I believe that in all cases, at the end, they were able to be matir the agudos. So we start the Mishnah. Va'isha shaholach baila l'mdina sayam. Medina sayam is a phrase that is used by the Mishnah very often to indicate that he went on a long journey. And in those days, for business purposes, it was necessary to go on a long journey. And it could be months, if not a half a year or a year, until he comes back. And he's traveling on the seas, and it's very dangerous. Bo v'omerla meis bailek. Now, the language of bo in plural seems to indicate that there were two witnesses that testified that we know that your husband died. We saw his body. But yet, the question is, why does the Mishnah even bother with establishing the reliability of two witnesses? If there were two witnesses, then that's what the Torah says, Al Pishnayim Eidim Yakum Dov. And we're going to see in the Gemara, I'm just giving you a little bit of a preview, that we're really talking about only one witness. And the Gemara is going to discuss why does it use the plural bo in the plural. In any event, a lot of what we're going to see here in Masechet Yevamot, in this parak Va'isha Rabbah, is also in a chapter at the end of Masechet Ksubos. There's going to be a lot of overlap. We'll have to compare that Gemara to this. Fine. The witness came in. Again, we don't know why one witness is enough, but maybe she didn't even get a green light from Bezdin allowing her to get remarried because the Torah doesn't rely on one witness. So she went ahead and she got married. In the language of the Mishnah V'Nises. And here's where life gets complicated. The Achkach Ba Ba'il. A husband did not die, as the witness testified. Again, did he lie through his teeth? Did he make a mistake about identifying the body? It was really someone else that died. I don't know. But the Baal is alive. Now, we know that if a woman who's married has a relationship with another man, the child of that other man, through her, before she got a get or before her husband died, is a mamzer. Not only that, we know that if a woman has this, we'll call it extramarital relationship, once we clarify that with evidence, we prohibit her from A, going back to her first husband, and B, from being married to the second husband. And that's called in the language of the Mishnah, Teitze Mizeh u'Mizeh. She cannot be married neither to him nor to him. We have other issues that have to be addressed in Hilchos Karbanos. And that is, does she have to bring a korban? Every relationship she had out of the framework of marriage and her husband is still alive requires a korban chatas. But on the other hand, she relied on the testimony of a witness. The Mishnah says, Teitze mizeh umizeh, utzricha get mizeh umizeh. Now watch what happens. The first husband, and she can no longer she cannot resume her marriage relation with her husband. He's got to deliver a get because she's an Ashes Ish. The second husband is not married to her. Even if he had the Rashka Bahad who officiated at her wedding, it was a wedding under false premises. She was a married woman. When a married woman gets married again without getting a divorce from her first husband, if her husband didn't die, then that second marriage is meaningless. It's worthless. It doesn't register at all. And yet the Mishnah establishes that she needs a get even from the second husband to allow her to marry another man. And one thing I can tell you up front, the first get from her first husband is d'oraisa. The second is d'rabbanan. Why would d'rabbanan require a get from the second husband? And the answer is that many people were at the wedding and they were living together as husband and wife. You know, she was on the membership board of the sisterhood of the shul. He was on the membership board of the shul. And for years, they've been living together as husband and wife. In the mindset of all the people, there was no other husband here involved. They don't know about what went on. And they're going to see her go out of this marriage without a get. So in order to avoid any such suspicion, we're going to require a get from the second husband. Now, when she marries the third husband, the child is not a mamzer. No one even thinks that the child will be a mamzer because she clearly was divorced from a second husband. She got a get from a second husband. But you imagine if she got married based on nullifying the second marriage without a get from the second husband, people would not know that she was out of the marriage to the second husband. And when she marries the third husband, they think that she's living in sin. She did not receive a get from the second husband. The child from that third husband is a mamzer. So we have to avoid all of that. And to some extent, it means that we're going to recognize the ishus. Ishus means the marriage relationship between her and the second husband, which is wild when you think about it. But on a rabbinic level, we're going to recognize the validity of that marriage such that now she has to get a get in order to undermine that ishus and allow her to marry a third guy. On a d'oraisa level, there is no ishus to the second husband. There cannot be ishus to the second husband. She's married to the first husband. And at this point, we're going to begin to see why this chapter of Yevamot overlaps with Masechet Ksubos. The latter addresses the issue of a document which is written up and given, and signed by two Eidim, and given by the husband to his wife under the chuppah, that obligates him to pay a very substantial sum of money if he divorces her. And this was a rabbinic institution to avoid a case where a man might get angry at his wife and very easily, out of anger, just divorce her. And never she's a divorcee. We want to make it challenging and difficult and deter a person, discourage a person for just simply getting angry at his wife one day and giving her a gift. So we tell the Baal, watch it. If you deliver a get to your wife, you will have to pay a severe penalty. And that's Masayim Zuz, 200 Zuz. And that's a Chiv Ksuba. Now, in our case, the issue would be a twofold issue. Number one, does the first husband have to pay the ksuba? And number two, does the second husband have to pay the ksuba? Now, obviously, the second husband is not really our husband. The whole ishus is a fiction. But on a drabbanan level, since we recognize that marriage, to the extent to which we require, before she gets married to Baal number 3, she has to get a get from Baal number 2, does the second Baal have to pay a ksuba? And the Mishnah says v'ein lo ksuba, which means she doesn't get ksuba from the first husband nor from the second husband. Now, I understand why she doesn't deserve a ksuba from the second husband, because that was not a valid marriage. And Ishus is the source that generates the chiyuv ksuba. But what about the first husband? That was certainly a valid Ishus, to the extent to which that she can't get married without a get. Why doesn't the first husband have to pay the ksuba? The answer is because she went ahead and married a second husband while she was still married to the first husband, Baruch Hashem, alive and well. And he says, you're now forcing me to divorce my wife because she had an extra marital relationship. And now you expect me to pay a ksuba to a woman who during my lifetime went ahead and had a marriage relation with another man? I have to pay a ksuba? Are you discouraging me or encouraging me to deliver the get? The purpose of a ksuba is to discourage a person from giving a get. In this particular scenario, we want to encourage him to give a get. We're going to even force him to give a get. Is memela v'lo peros v'lo mezonos v'lo blos lo zeh lo al zeh v'lo al zeh. Included in the takon of ksuba as Rabbanan designed it are other obligations that are incumbent upon a husband, above and beyond the Masayim Zuz that he has to deliver in a case of get. For example, Mizonos, I'm skipping for a moment Peros. Mizonos is what we call support. And in the context of ksuba, a husband has to support his wife. Here, you're forcing him to divorce his wife. She broke the marriage, the marriage loyalty. And now you're telling him he has to give mizonos? Now let's talk about peros. Now, peros is really in the opposite direction, meaning this takon of peros was not meant for the benefit of the wife, like the other takonos that we mentioned, Masayim Zuz, that she collects in time of divorce, Mizonos, that he has to support her. Those are all takonos in the ksuba that reflect her rights. But there's a takon in the ksuba that reflects his rights. And he has a right to say, look, when I married you, you owned a piece of property. Now I'm obligated in the framework of marriage through the ksuba to support you. It's only fair, therefore, that if you make profit on the real estate that you own, that profit accrues to me. So let's say, for example, she owns an apartment and there are renters who are paying monthly rent. Those fees will now accrue to the husband within the framework of the ksuba. And that means we're protecting his rights, no less than her rights, because we want to be fair to both sides. And he gets rights to the peros. Peros, which literally translates as fruits, means any sort of increment in the value of what she brought into the marriage. So in the old days, that would mean peros literally. She brought in a piece of land, a tract of land, and you could plant it and you could produce. That produce belongs to the husband within the framework of marriage. Today, unless you're in an agricultural location, it's a little more relevant to speak about rental fees. And the ground, meaning the apartment, the flat, is now producing rental fees. That money is given to the husband in lieu of the fact that he's paying her mizonos. Now, you might ask me, well, in our case, why don't we at least protect the rights of the husband to collect peros? Because he wasn't guilty of having an affair, she was. But the answer is that since there are no mizonos, then he doesn't get rights to her peros, because The way the Chachamim organized and orchestrated the Ksuba, she gets Mizonos, he gets Peros, and it's what we call a quid pro quo relationship. If she doesn't get Mizonos, then he has no rights to Peros. Now, there's a footnote here. I'm just taking a look here. It says here that the legal rights of the husband to enjoy the fruits and profits of his wife's property and the benefit of the wife receives, namely mizonos, is an exchange for this right that's given to the husband. Also, the husband has an obligation, and it's another right of the woman to demand it, that in event, heaven forbid, she falls into captivity, he has to raise the funds to ransom her. So now he has an obligation which, within the framework of marriage and ksuba, he took upon himself to ransom her, which is worth a lot of money. Apparently, there were terrible, recurring cases of women who were hijacked. I don't know what word you want to use. They were taken captive, and sometimes the captors would demand an exorbitant fee before they would allow her to go free. If he obligated himself in the framework of ksuba to ransom her, that's called pidyon, then we have to give him something in return, quid pro quo, and that's eros, the fruits and the benefits that accrue to her field. Now, in our case, the woman had an extramarital affair. She forfeits her rights to demand that her husband ransom her, again, which could be a very significant sum, in event that she's captive. Once she gives up on her rights, and whether she gives it up or not, we'll take it away from her because she had this adulterous relationship, then he no longer gets his rights to the payros. He writes here, neither of the husbands, and he puts the word husbands in quotation marks because the second one is not really a husband, should be entitled to the produce of her property, which is given in exchange for his obligation to ransom her. Now, he has a long discussion here, which I'll just mention. We're not going to get into. It's very futuristic. What about payros that the husband collected until we found out that he was really alive? Meaning, there was an entire interim period of time where Beis Din was convinced by testimony that he had died. And let's say the rental fees still went into his bank account because we were working under the assumption that he's, I don't know, I'm sorry. And he came back. The second husband for sure has no rights to payments. I mean,
he was collecting. He was
the second husband was collecting. I didn't understand that. 1 second. Oh yeah, maybe you're right. Well, let me read this again. I thought the question was regarding produce during the period of time when we thought the husband was dead. But he's saying no. The second husband was never entitled to produce. So the second husband was collecting over this entire period of time the benefits of her possessions, of her real estate. He was putting it into his bank account. we thought the marriage was valid. We didn't know that the husband from the first marriage was alive. Now the question is, should we penalize him and force him retroactively to give up on his rights to the fruits that were produced by her field or the rental, because in truth he never had rights to those papers? What should we say the following? The one who really deviated from the right path here and should be penalized is her, not him. He didn't marry her suspecting that she was married to the first husband. Now, again, we haven't gotten to the question of the validity of the evidence, but let's say there's valid evidence, which turns out to be not valid, but at the time that the second husband married her, in all naivete, he had every reason to believe that this was a valid marriage. So should we penalize the second husband and force him to cough up all the produce that has accrued and entered into his bank account? And here it says, below payrots. And the question is, what does that mean below payrots? Below payrots from now on, that's for sure. Or does it mean that all the payrots that he had already cashed in retroactively, he had no rights to those payrolls, the marriage wasn't valid, he's got to reimburse them for those payrolls? And that's going to be the machlokas and the Rishonim and the Meiri and others. Below blows. Blows means clothing that have disintegrated after a long period of use. He calls it here remnants of clothing brought into the marriage Okay, so this has to do with the halacha of nichsei maluk. I don't know if we'll have to go into that right now. I think it's premature. Let's just suffice it to say that if the garments go down in value, the question is who's going to suffer that decrease in value? Now, assuming that she brought in a wardrobe into the marriage, which is called, again, if you remind me, we'll talk about it sometime, called nichsei malug. Again, half of the Masechet Yevamot we can't learn in 5 minutes, but it has to do with nichsei malug. All right, I'm going to just leave that as a separate, because we won't understand nichsei malug unless we understand nichsei tzom. All right. So remind me that we'll have to come back to this discussion about blows. The imnitola notla mizeh umizeh tachsi. Since she has no rights to any of the above listed, enumerated financial advantages or benefits, if she had collected any of them, she's got to cough them up and return them to the rightful owner. So let's say, for example, she had collected the ksuba. He now has a right to demand that she reimburse him, and get back that money, because so she has no rights to the ksuba. Or, for example, mizonos. Let's say one of the two husbands shelled out for support. He wants that money back, and he has rights to get that money back. Vavlad, mamzer, mizeh, umizeh. Now, I understand that the child from the second husband is a mamzer. But what does it mean, mizeh, umizeh, from both husbands? Why would the child from the first husband, which is a valid marriage, be a mamzer? And we're going to have to go back to our original premise that the Rabbanon actually upgraded and recognized the status of the second marriage. So much so that we require a get from the second marriage. And not only do we require a get from the second marriage, there's going to be mamzeres from the second marriage if she gets pregnant from another man before the second husband delivers his get. We're going to consider it as if she's married to the second husband. My only question is what happens if before the second husband gives a get, she has a relationship with her first husband, to whom she's legally married according to the Torah? Will the child be a mamzer? And my impression is that the answer is yes, because since the Rabbanan recognized the second marriage, and that's why the child from any other man before she got a get from her second husband is a mamzer, the same thing should apply if she had a relationship with her first husband. Pretty wild. Now, this part of the Mishnah, the lo zemizev metamilu, is basically a result or an application of everything we've said until now. We're basically terminating the relationship with both of these husbands. And she cannot go back and have a marriage relationship with either of these two men. She needs a get from both of these men. Which one of these two men will have to bury her when she dies? Burial is an expensive undertaking. The answer is neither of them. Lo zeh v'zeh mitamil. None of them will contaminate themselves by burying her, because the chiyuv kfura is not incumbent upon neither the first husband, the second, because she's not married to either of them. Okay, we'll stop here because there's a lot more here in the Mishnah, but at least we got haskalah. We got to start. Okay, let me take this opportunity to wish you a great day. And I don't know, are you able to get a Gemara? Are you able to get your hands on a Gemara Yevamos? On?
You're talking to us?
Yeah,
I have.
you have a Gemara Yevamos.
Yes.
Okay, Galaxy. I think it's Chaim, I think. Very good.
Okay, Rabbi, I'll send you an email about your question.
Oh, thanks.
Okay.
Have a great day.